Okay, so let's get right into it. We all think we know the story, right? You've got the wild Prince Hal, and then you have his larger-than-life, always drinking buddy, Sir John Falstaff. It's one of the most famous friendships in all of literature. But what if I told you it wasn't a friendship at all? What if it was actually one of the most calculated, cold-blooded political schemes ever devised?
And that's really the big question we're digging into here. Was Falstaff a real friend, a kind of mentor figure to a rebellious young prince? Or was he just a pawn, a disposable piece on the board in Hal's long game to grab the crown and keep it? Well, the evidence points to something way more complex and way more ruthless than just a story about a kid acting out.
Because you see, from the absolute beginning, Prince Hal had a plan. All that time he spent slumming it in the dive bars of Eastcheap, that wasn't him running away from his duties. No, that was his duty. It was the most important part of his entire political education. This was high-stakes political theater from start to finish. So this is the key takeaway. We've got to stop thinking of the tavern as just a place for a party. For Hal, it was a lab. Seriously, it was a controlled environment where he could test out his public image, gather intel, and basically rehearse for the role of a lifetime, being the king.
And you know how we know this for sure? Because Hal tells us himself. Right at the beginning of the story, in his very first solo speech, he lays out the entire strategy. He straight up admits he's hanging out with this unyoked, wild and undisciplined crowd to intentionally make himself look bad. This isn't some guilty confession. It's a mission statement.
What Hal is doing here, well, it has a name. We call it political theater. And it's this idea that a leader's power doesn't just come from who they are, but from the story they can sell to the public. It's all about crafting a performance to win influence. And let me tell you, Hal was an absolute master of it.
So, how does a plan like this actually work? I mean, it sounds completely backwards, right? Well, the first step was to build a terrible reputation for himself. And for Hal, this was pure genius.
Think of it like this, like you're playing the stock market. Hal was basically shorting his own reputation. He was driving the price way, way down because he knew that when he finally decided to turn it all around, the comeback would be massive. It was a calculated investment in his own future glory.
And the psychology here is just fascinating. I mean, if Hal had been the perfect, straight-laced prince his whole life, everyone would just expect it. It would be boring. Nobody would be impressed. But by starting out as this supposed screw-up, his eventual transformation into a great king would seem like a miracle. It wouldn't just be good, it would be dazzling, like the sun suddenly bursting through dark clouds. Now, to make that transformation as dramatic as possible, he needed the perfect contrast. He needed a living symbol of everything he was supposedly leaving behind. And enter Falstaff. The guy is the embodiment of chaos, of overindulgence, of total disorder. Falstaff wasn't just a friend, he was a stage prop in Hal's epic redemption story.
But building an image was only part of the strategy. That tavern, it served a much more practical purpose too. You see, it was Hal's classroom, and it was a place where he could learn things he could never, ever learn back at the royal court.
While his dad, the king, was totally isolated inside the palace walls, Hal was out there, on the ground. He was getting what you could call a common education. He was learning about the very people he would one day have to rule in a way that no stuffy, aristocratic upbringing could ever teach him.
So what was he learning exactly? Well, he learned how regular people actually talked, their slang, their jokes. He figured out their psychology, what made them tick, what they were afraid of, and what they really resented about the people in power. This wasn't about making friends. This was about gathering priceless intelligence so he could build a huge base of popular support when he finally took the throne.
And this is such a crucial point to understand. Hal was in this world, for sure, but he was never really of it. He was always watching, always the student taking notes. He's not really taking part in the chaos. He's studying it, analyzing it, all for his future reign.
Which brings us to the third part of his strategy. And this is where it gets pretty chilling, to be honest. The tavern wasn't just a place to watch people. It was a stage where Hal could actually practice being king.
You know those famous scenes where Hal and Falstaff play act pretending to be the king and the prince? We usually think of them as just harmless fun, but they're not. They are dress rehearsals for power. This is where Hal gets to test out the cold, hard language of authority long before he ever has to use it for real.
And in one of these rehearsals, we get this absolutely terrifying peek into the future.
While he's playing the part of his father, the king, someone asks him if he would banish the troublesome Falstaff. And his reply? Without even a second of hesitation, he says, "I do, I will." And just like that, the fun stops. This isn't a joke anymore. The future king has just made a promise.
And that one little line, "I do, I will," the truth is just laid bare. The friendship, if it was ever real to begin with, is already dead. It's been sacrificed to the cold, hard math of political necessity. Falstaff is just an actor in the play, and Hal's perfecting his role as the monarch.
And that rehearsal? Well, it would eventually become a brutal public reality. Hal's big branding campaign needed one last ultimate sacrifice to seal the deal.
So, let's walk through this final act. Hal's father dies. He is now King Henry V. Falstaff hears the news and rushes to London, probably thinking, "This is it. I'm going to be the most powerful man in the kingdom." He expects a huge reward, but instead, he walks him right into the grand finale of Hal's performance.
In front of the entire court, with everybody watching, the new King Henry looks at his old mentor, his old companion, and delivers one of the cruelest, most savage lines in all of literature. "I know thee not, old man." It is a public, humiliating, and absolute rejection.
Now, this wasn't just personal cruelty. This was a political masterstroke. In that single moment, he killed off the wild Prince Hal and gave birth to the disciplined, sober King Henry. He basically committed social suicide, torching his personal connections to project this image of perfect order and control for the good of the country.
And this is the fundamental conflict, isn't it? On one side, you have Hal, the person, who might have actually cared about friendship and human connection. But on the other side, you have King Henry V, the symbol, who has to put public order and the stability of the crown above everything else. The symbol had to destroy the man.
And the tragic, bottom-line conclusion is this. King Henry V becomes one of England's greatest heroes. His success is the stuff of legend. But it's a success that is built entirely on the wreckage of his own humanity. And Falstaff's broken heart? Well, that was just collateral damage. Which leaves us with a really unsettling final question. Was Hal right? Is the ability to treat other human beings as disposable political tools, is that a necessary evil for being an effective leader? To become a great symbol for your people, do you first have to sacrifice the actual person you are? It's a question that's just as real and just as uncomfortable today as it was in Shakespeare's time.